Welcome to A Warm Embrace, your go to destinations for all things motivation. I'm your host, Guillermo Lopez, and I'm thrilled to embark on this journey with you and to explore the endless possibilities of self improvement, personal growth, and achieving your dreams. Today, we're proud to be joined by Alenka Kyslik, who is the founder of Zaha, a platform that connects those who have not found answers in conventional medicine with experts and with shared values. Thank you very much, Alenka. We very much appreciate you being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for this.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me go ahead and offer a bit of context to you and also to our listening and viewing audience about what a warm embrace is. It's about cultivating an environment where individuals are not only acknowledged, but they're truly valued, understood, and embraced. We've built an ecosystem focused on ensuring that everyone feels seen, heard, and loved. And this guiding principle extends across various dimensions of life, whether they be personal, professional, emotional, and spiritual. We're genuinely delighted to have you, and we're excited to learn more about you and about your unique insights and perspectives. So, without further delay, are you ready to embark on this enriching journey?
I am ready.
Great. Well, today we'll be talking about the power of resilience, strategies for bouncing back from adversity. Considering your personal and professional backgrounds, why don't you start off by telling us what today's theme means to you?
The theme of bouncing back to me means a lot of different things. I think primarily it means being kind to yourself in the worst parts of it, finding the effort and the energy and the support systems to get through it, and to really give yourself the time and the grace to do what you need to do to heal from whatever it is, and then to grow to a place where you can become a new you, because the old you got you to that, the place that you were at. So you need to grow and become a different version of you to continue your life for the better.
It's truly about self care, isn't it? Right?
It really is.
It's true. Sometimes I think about that we often kinder to others, but leave ourselves for last. And I think that one of the things that I've been really thinking about and working on recently on my end is the fact that we need to show ourselves, or I need to show myself the same grace that I'm willing to show others. And I think that that's a beautiful thing, because at the end of the day, we're living our lives as in these bodies. We're these spiritual beings leading these human experiences, but we tend to give so much of ourselves to others that we forget ourselves. Wouldn't you
Yeah.
agree?
Oh, for sure. That's how I burnt out. Is I pushed everyone before me, and then all of a sudden my body was like, "No, we're done here." And, and I didn't have a choice. So, yeah, I
That
completely
burnout,
think
that
how you're
burnout is
feeling.
really key.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that we try to go ahead and avoid. And I really love how you started off with this episode by talking about self-care. And with that, let me go ahead and ask you, so what does resilience mean to you, and why is it important?
Resilience to me means finding hope when you think there is none. That can be in the smallest of things, like enjoying the way the sun is coming through the windows, or the fact that you had a place to sleep, right? And finding that hope is what keeps us going. They say hope is one of the most powerful things that exists in the world, right? Hope and love, that those are, and we were talking about self-love. Wrap those together. That is what gets you through some of the toughest things. And you see it in all of those beautiful stories of people getting through the hardest things that you can't imagine, because you would never want to be there yourself, right?
Agreed. At least what I find about resilience is that I likened it to the armor that we wear. It's something like that. It's that personal superhero cape that we wear. Because at the end of the day, we have to keep moving forward, and I think that hope really does allow for that. But resilience is what keeps us going, don't you think?
Yeah, it keeps us going. They say that grit, which I think is a, close friend to
Mhm.
resilience, is what gets people through some of the hardest things, is just pushing and pushing and pushing through, and making sure that you give yourself rest when you need it, but you also continue to push and ensure that you kind of take that next step.
Definitely. And can you share a personal story about when you've been able to show resilience?
So I think we can go to my story about burnout. I kind of alluded to it already. So I pushed myself really hard. I was always a people pleaser and overachiever. So for the better part of a decade, and then my body shut down. And when I say shut down, I mean I could like barely get out of bed, couldn't like feed myself like more than a bag of chips, because was easy. I ground my teeth so hard that I still to this day cannot drink really hot or really cold things. Like even daytime grinding, like that includes a mouth guard, right? And I will say for me, this was not a journey that I did alone. I had community that really stepped in and that helped. I had a friend who flew in and helped me, clean my kitchen, because I just didn't have the energy to do that. I cried when she did it, because It felt so out of reach for me to do on my own. I had friends who stayed and would check in, like, "Did you eat today? Did you, get up and move in some way today?" Right? And that took months to kind of get to a place where I was somewhat functional and a lot of energy to show up for work, to show up for, things that I had to do in order to survive. And giving myself grace through that period and taking naps. I cannot like, the power of naps for me is magical. When you need it, let your body rest. And if
I
that just means
agree.
lying down and not actually sleeping, that's okay too. There's interesting science that says that it still helps. But giving myself the time and the patience to get through it, but then also learning. And that's something that I think is really interesting. There was a fascinating TED Talk radio episode about this where they said that those who grow through adversity are the ones who choose to. You have to make a choice to learn and a choice to understand how you got there and what it is you need to stop doing in order to move forward and do better. And so I think it was a mixture of all of those things in time, right? The thing that we never want to use that got me to a place now 3 years later where I'm feeling like a whole new version of myself and I'm able to do things like create a company, right? Like that was not in the cards a few years ago.
But it gave you something tangible. It gave you something real. And correct me if I'm wrong, it gave you something that you can look back on and think, I overcame that, and this is what I have here. And I think that that truly speaks to what resilience is. It
Mhm.
really is about the fact that you're able to go ahead and look back and see how far I've come. Because when we're in it, we don't feel it.
Mm-mm-mm. No, no, and I think it's so important in every little way, right? To think like, "Oh, I've come so far," because habits are built in small increments. They're tiny little changes. You drink an extra glass of water, you take a 5-minute walk, you stand up every 30 minutes, whatever the thing is for you, and we build on that, and we kind of forget because we're humans tend to not think about the whole grand progression, but it's so important to think back and say, "Hey, however many years ago or even a month ago, I was a different person and I've grown so much." And remember that because like you said, you give other people that benefit of the doubt. You look at other people and you're like, "I'm so proud of you. You've come so far." But we don't do that to ourselves often enough, and
Great.
it's so important to do that.
And let me ask you, you did mention something when you were going through your hardest moments and you were going through your burnout. You did mention about the fact that you had a village, that you didn't do it alone, you had the community. How was that for you in receiving? I asked that question because we come when a person who has experienced burnout, as you've experienced, and people who are givers, because there are a lot of us who are givers and we give more to others than we would give to ourselves. How was receiving that grace and how was receiving that help and that assistance for you?
Initially, very difficult, I think. Like you said, I'm not one who's used to asking for help. I'm not one who's used to asking others to accommodate around my needs. I would always accommodate around every other scene. So I something I'm learning is that it's okay to ask for help. You are not helpless by asking for help. And it is hard to adjust to that new mentality, but it's true. We all need help in different ways. I then after burnout, I went and tore apart my ankle and I couldn't walk. Asking for help is okay. And I think the hard thing is when you give, you sometimes feel taken advantage of. And so you don't ever want to feel like you're putting that same burden on someone else, right?
Yes.
And having open communication and talking with people, it's amazing how many people will step up and say, "Hey, you've helped me for so many years. You never asked anything of me. Of course, I'm going to help you with this thing." Right. And it can be like the smallest things. Like a friend sent me a gift certificate for like Uber Eats, right? Because it was just, cooking was one of those things. It was too hard to stand up for too long with my foot, right? So it can come in different forms. It can come in the form of a text message, like someone's thinking about you. They just want you to know, like, it can look like different things, but I think it's so important to ask for help and ask for it in whatever way you feel comfortable with, and it is a muscle you need to practice.
Agreed. That muscle. It's so true. And I really love what you said. You're not helpless by asking for help. These nuggets that I get from episodes such as this, where it's like these are little mantras that I can always bring into my case. And I know that for our audience, they love these little mantras or these little nuggets that they can use because it's true. And the examples that you're using, how many of your friends, how many of the members of your community stepped up and were wanting to step up? That was one of the pain points, if you will, that I previously started experiencing because of the fact it's like, or I was ignorant to the fact that there are so many people that want to help. It's almost to the point where, and maybe you might have experienced this or not, but that was something that I used to believe. It's like, oh, I'm the one that has to give. I am the giver. I am the one, that's my role. And so it didn't dawn on me that there were so many other people who were wanting to give as well. And that's what was until the moment that I began to feel that I could receive, or I felt worthy of receiving,
Mhm.
and that there was grace in receiving, that I was able to see that I am not alone, or that you're not alone, that we are not alone in the fact that we don't monopolize the market in giving. And
So
that's
well
so
said. So well, it's so true. I think, one thing I wanna touch on that you said, and I think it's so beautiful, is that we are worth receiving.
yes,
Our worth is not only in giving. The human experience is a shared experience, and it's an experience that is best when it's connected, right? And
correct.
the connection goes both ways, right? It is a point of connection, we see it as going both ways. It is not a one-way street, right? So,
Hmm.
allowing yourself to say, "I am worth receiving, and my worth is not only in giving," is a game changer.
Yes. Agreed. Agreed. So you also mentioned the muscle. So let me go ahead and move into that next question. How can people build a resilient mindset?
This is something that's come up a lot for me this week. It's so funny how these themes happen, right? Uh, the hardest
It's
things in
kismet
life.
sometimes.
It's so funny. It's so funny. And it's come up in, I think, 3 different conversations with close friends. The hardest things in life are the ones that are most worth it. So, like, we talk about looking at the end result, right? The end result, and like, let's say in resiliency, like, you got there, you did the thing. But we don't often talk about the journey and what it took to get there. And we kind of dismiss it and we're like, "Oh, like, whatever, it's not a big deal." It is. Like, you were the one
Agreed.
who went through that journey. The journey was not easy. You need to give your 'cause because the journey is often where we give up or say we don't wanna do it anymore for whatever reason. And just getting up every day and being okay with where we're at and then saying, "I'm gonna try." And I know that maybe today isn't the day where I step forward, maybe it's the 2 step back day. But the fact that you tried is a huge deal. Like that, because they say, like, I'm sure you've had it. You show up even for, like, an online class for, like, exercising, right? A YouTube pre-recorded class, and they're like, "You showed up today, that was the biggest step." And it's so true. You showed up. You are here with the intention of doing something and growing. Without that, nothing else happens. So give yourself grace and give yourself credit for just doing that every day, because that builds up to something in the end. What that something is, we don't know yet, but you'll get there eventually.
True. True. And you previously mentioned something about making a choice. And that's something that, for example, that's becoming into my life recently, because I'm actually reading a book entitled The Courage to Be Disliked. And it's a beautiful book. It really is a beautiful book. And it talks early on in the book about we choose who we are, we choose what we do, but we often go ahead and label it under, oh, this is who I am, or this is what I do. But therein lies the contradiction. It's because we are making that choice. So when you think about that, and when you also think of resilience, going back to the whole statement of choice, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think we grow up, or at least my experience was, you grow up in a certain environment. And in order to be accepted in that environment, you have to have certain behaviors, you have to act a certain way, right? I remember, being so proud of myself as a little kid, hanging out with like my grandparents and their friends, which are obviously decades older than me, and just being quiet and sipping my tea, right? And being super well behaved, which it was great in the context that it was in. But now looking back, I'm like, well, maybe that little kid inside of me wanted to run around the room, right? Maybe she wanted to do something else. But in that moment, that is what you need to do to kind of grow and be safe in the environment you're in. As adults, we don't need to do that anymore. And I think that transition is so hard, because then you have to start listening to yourself. And that's where that choice comes in, right? Listening to what your body needs, listening to, hey, does it feel good to be in this room with these people? Do I like that person? Do I want to be here? Maybe I'm ready to go home. Like, I'm tired. I don't, like, whatever it is. But learning to, because that can come across as dislike to your, like, because if you're used to, I was used to being the last one at any gathering, talking and chatting to people. And now I'm like, actually, I like my sleep. 10 p.m. is a great bedtime, right? Like, I'm gonna leave now. But it's scary initially, because it's scary to show up differently than what you're used to, and show up in a way that could potentially, of course, I'm always grateful to anyone who has cooked me dinner, or, we've spent time with people, and I make sure to communicate that. But my previous self was like, "Oh, you have to stay. You have to be the last person here." But Today's self is like, no, my sleep is going to make a change in my day tomorrow. That is more important for me right now. And learning those, and that's just like a small example, but learning to be more comfortable with that and okay with that and choosing yourself in those moments initially is very hard. And the more you do it, the easier it is, right? Flexing that muscle.
But it's a very true example. I mean, at the end of the day, I understand it so well because I tended to be that way as well. It's like, yes, I was always the last one at the party. I felt like I didn't want to miss anything. And because I felt that that was the right and the important thing to do. And maybe I wasn't self aware enough to know that, but it was in the moments when you start making different choices, when you start valuing yourself in a different manner and you start going back to that self care that you spoke about earlier, you start realizing where those thought processes were coming from or what was governing your decisions and your desires previously, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. It's understanding why you think or why you act the way you do, because that's ultimately understanding yourself. And I think something that's so important that we often ignore or don't think about is you are the only person you are stuck with for the rest of your life.
Agreed.
What does that mean? What does that look like? Why aren't you getting to know yourself, right? Like, get to know yourself and get to understand yourself because ultimately, yes, it's good to know everyone around you as well, but they're not stuck with you. Like you are the only person in your own body, hopefully, right? And so what does that mean? Why don't we put more effort into getting to know ourselves and getting to know our needs and understanding ourselves? Because it's been this transformational journey since all of this, where now I had someone visiting and I said, "Hey, I need to lie down. I had a headache. I need to lie down." Do they want to be in my company when I have a headache? Absolutely not. But did I feel, like was it hard to say I need to lie down when I had people over? Yes. But that's nobody wants a grumpy Alenka. Like nobody does, right? So like and it's
And in a prior life, you would have bit down your teeth and bared that headache, wouldn't you?
of course, absolutely. A year ago I did, you know?
I love what you're saying because they're examples that we can all relate to, even though we think that they're small examples, but they're not. It's because they are these genuine examples that a lot of us can truly relate to. It's like we make it a best effort to put our best foot forward in spite of ourselves because we're not thinking about the reasons why.
I love that you say in spite of ourselves. It's so true.
Because it's true, we do it in spite of ourselves and we never think that we always think, oh, somebody did something in spite of me, but we are our primary actors who do that. And I loved even how you're saying we're the only ones living in our bodies, which is true. And why is it that we are so interested in learning about others, but we have such a difficulty in learning about ourselves? Why is it that we have that difficulty in having that conversation with ourselves? It's like I had this calculus teacher when I was in high school, and he says, you know what, if you all see me walking around, you'll see me talking to myself. And of course, as high school students, we would always laugh, and he would always say, he goes, the problem is if I start answering myself. But the truth of the matter is, we need to start answering ourselves. We need to be able to ask ourselves the tough questions. We need to be able to ask those introspective questions that we would want to know from somebody else, because sometimes that gives us so much insight into our own person.
It's so true, and I think one of the key things in that is not judging ourselves. So we realize that, like, feel like we need to be in the room because we're the host, as an example, right? Like in this case, I was the host, and according to all of the social norms I grew up with, like immigrant child, like you always have to like take care of everyone else around you. Excellent host, make sure everyone has anything they might possibly need. You probably don't eat that night, like that kind of like, why can't I sit down and realize like, hey, yes, of course, it's important to be a good host, but nobody wants a grumpy host. And like, these are good friends that can get their glass of water themselves. Like, they're comfortable in my kitchen, but not getting upset at myself, right? Because beating ourselves doesn't help. Like, when we beat ourselves up in our head and get upset at ourselves for and being and judgmental of the things we're thinking, it doesn't help. So, how can we like listen to those thoughts without judgment and try to understand them? And then we can do something about them, right? Because like, you see a little kid fall, you don't say, "Why did you fall?" You say, "Are you okay?" Can we do that to ourselves?
You've really given us a lot, but let me go ahead and just ask you one more question. And I really thank you for your time. How do you feel that mindset and attitude affect bouncing back from adversity?
It's the most important thing. But I do think that we need to understand that every season of our life, we are going to have a different mindset and a different level of energy to process that mindset. So we need to be kind to ourselves in what we have today. So what do you have available? Like you talk about your glasses, how full is your glass, right? In terms of like what you're able to pour out and give to others. Where are you at today? Because if that glass is empty, you're going to feel a lot differently than if that glass is full. And every day we feel differently, depends on what you ate yesterday or drank or if you slept, right? And we understand that in terms of how much coffee we drink the next day. We need to give ourselves the same credit in terms of how much energy we have to do something about our mindset, do something about the next day, right? It's a life isn't as black and white as it would be easy to, like live by. It's so gray. And so we need to give ourselves credit and be kind to ourselves in our self-talk and push ourselves as much as we have this space and energy for, but be mindful of what that looks like.
Well, thank you so much. I like to end our podcast by always giving some key takeaways. For starters, I love how you started with the self-care. But it's true. We need to truly care for ourselves because at the end of the day, we can only give so much to other people with what we have. And a friend of mine used to tell me, a very wise friend of mine, she told me one time, she goes, you know what, Guillermo, you want to give so much, but you're blocking God's grace. And when I heard that, and I go, what do you mean? And she goes, you're blocking God's grace because you're unwilling to receive. Immediately, what I took into my mind was an elbow joint. And it's like, here I'm wanting to give all this love or all this contribution out to the world. I wanted to be able to give all this help out to the world. And I'm sitting there with a closed valve trickling out because I'm unwilling to receive God's graces. And because I was so in my mind being a giver and therefore I'm not a receiver, that's how I was precluding those graces from being given to me. And when she said that, that was an eye opener for me because at the end of the day, I can only give so much. It was in those moments that I realized I can give so much more. I can really fulfill that calling of wanting to give so much more by being able to receive. Those words that you said, it's not helpless to ask for help. That was an amazing little nugget for me because at the end of the day, even as a person who has learned to receive and still wants to give, sometimes you feel it gives that connotation of asking for help, you feel weak. But when you say that, it's true. It's not. There is no weakness. And there's actually quite a bit of strength in being able to ask for assistance. It means there's this connection to society as a whole that we're not just ourselves in this world. Because at the end of the day, it almost allows for a contradiction. It's like, how can I want to be able to give to the world, but at the end of the day, think that it's only me? And by also allowing that conversation and that self-talk to be able to really be aware of the reasoning behind some of the things that I do and thinking, oh, this is how I used to do things, and now I'm going to be allowing for that self-care. And it goes into that mindset of showing grit and resilience, as you mentioned, because at the end of the day, I can go ahead and really take stock of what I've overcome. I can go ahead and do these minor or mirror checks when I can go ahead and say, oh wow, I accomplished that. I may have been at my lowest or one of my low points, but I was able to get back up and I was able to move forward. And I really thank you for that because it really allows our audience to truly think that we are not alone. We're not alone in some of these feelings. We're not alone in some of these thoughts. And I've often said that our problems are not necessarily unique because we all have them. They just manifest themselves differently. So, with that said, I want to give you the option to go ahead. What are some of your key takeaways? What do you want to go ahead and let our audience know to really grasp from this topic and this episode from you?
Yeah, something I've been thinking about as you've been talking about this is when you consider some people who are like at the top of what they do, right? You can talk about athletes, you can talk about leaders. They have a team surrounding them. They don't do it by themselves, and yet we think we have to do it by themselves. But if they didn't have that team, they would have to do things that they probably can do some of them and probably pretty well and maybe better than the people who are doing for them. But it takes away from what they are genius at. It takes away from the thing that they are really good at, that they can make a difference in the world because you're only one person, you only have so much time. So if you spend that time doing things that other people could help you with instead of taking care of the thing that you are really good at and giving back, let's say, then you can do less of it. You can't do as much of it without the help, right? And that can look like a lot of different things, but I think it's really important to remember that even if someone, take your pick of who it is, is the face of, like, getting through adversity or resilience or whatever. They often don't do it alone. There is a whole slew of people there. There's a village, like you were saying earlier, that is helping them get to that point, whether you see it or not. And I think it's so important to remember we are humans. We are in it together. We are not robots, right? And even robots need some sort of energy source, right? That's
It's true. And
so
I'm glad you said that.
yeah, like, and what is our energy source? What gives us energy? Honestly, for me, it's talking to people, brainstorming with people, getting understanding of, how things work. And like, I mean, I'm a total nut and a nerd for like information, but it's that's what gets me excited and gets me going. And everyone has a different thing for them, right? And so how can you show up to be the best version of you? And what support systems does that take to support you in doing that? And like, I wouldn't say take advantage of it, but don't not do it. Like, you need to do what supports you. If you didn't, you wouldn't be eating. So, food is important and it fuels us. And so are so many other pieces as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And if our audience wanted to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah. So, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at saha.collective. That's SAHA.collective or sahacollective.com. Or you can email me at info@sahacollective.com.
Great. Well, thank you once again. You certainly deliver so much, and we very much appreciate the golden nuggets that you provided. And to our beautiful audience, thank you again for always tuning in. All your messages, all your texts, all your posts are always very much welcome, and they are so warmly received. You can always find us on all social media platforms and on our podcast. And once again, Alenka, thank you so much for being with us. And from my heart to yours, a warm embrace.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting us by liking and subscribing to our channel. Your small gesture means the world to us and helps us continue creating more content like this. See you in the next video.